I mean, it's kind of like your origin story, I guess, kind of, in a way.
Yeah. Hmm.
So my husband, Jeremy, is French. He is from this area, and I've been living in New York for the past 11 years. And we've been together a little more than 5 years now. And his parents live in this area for about 3 or 4 years. So we had been visiting the area every summer and knew the area relatively well, at least the summer season. And since we met, really, we've been talking about how staying in New York, like the question of New York a little bit, and how
Yeah.
is that sustainable? And if you want things like to own a home or to have a family, or with our incomes, kind of things that we didn't think we would be able to afford in the way that we wanted to. So we
Hmm.
started to look, and then kind of like, what are those things that you hold dearest? And for me, choreography and dance is huge, but also like creating community quickly is something that I found that I'm good at and love. So
Hmm.
there are definitely things I love that I'm not good at, and some things I'm good at that I don't love. But that was kind of a core value for me. And Jeremy is a carpenter and a builder and a gardener and a cook and like all things with his hands. So when we started thinking like, oh, like creating a space seems like a really good fit for us, running a space, creating a space. And so we started to look upstate New York, Louisiana, because that's where my parents are and where I grew up ish. Um, Even like out west a little bit, like what if we went to Wyoming or something,
Yeah.
um, and France. And it ended up that being close to family felt more and more important as we kind of got older. And then just started looking at places. We decided like, okay, an arts residency retreat is the direction we want to go. And we started looking at places in summer 2019 here in this area, not thinking that we would buy at that time, but
Right.
thinking potentially we could. And we found this place, and we were like, we have to take it. Like, it's too good of a deal to pass up, and are we able to take it? And it's in our price range. And so we became official homeowners December 2019.
Okay.
So and the goal at that point was to continue to live in New York, come for the summers, and maybe Jeremy to come more, and then me commute back to New York, but kind of really split our time for a year or two while we got the residency underway. And then once, because we're really renovating so much. So we weren't thinking to live here while we renovated.
Was
Um,
he, and well, he wasn't, sorry, I'm interrupting you.
Go
In
ahead.
New York, was he working as a carpenter for like other artists, or, like, or on other kinds of stuff?
He did kind of a variety. At the end, he was doing like his own freelance carpentry and like TaskRabbit and Handy and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
he was kind of like doing everything from installing shelving to helping to, like, he helped to design a somebody's, like, I don't know, Buddhist display kind of
Oh,
center,
okay.
like just like whatever kind of came. And he ended, I mean, he's also a cook, so he like also worked at La Durée during that time as like a pastry chef kind of, and then went into did more like commercial carpentry like projects. He did like a project for some big like surfwear, like building out in Soho. They like build up those pop-ups for a few months and then tear them down. So
Oh, right. Yeah.
kind
Mhm.
of like, doing a little bit of everything. But for the past year, he had been doing his own projects, and that was working really well.
Mhm.
But then COVID hit, and that went totally away. And we stayed in New York for 2 months, and we're just like in our tiny studio with no backyard and no front yard. And we're like, we got to get out of here.
Yeah.
We,
I'm in
and
a tiny studio myself, so I get
yeah.
it.
And I mean, he had no work, and all of my work was virtual. So there was, and my company, like all of our performances had been canceled. And I mean,
Yeah.
everybody knows it.
Mhm.
But so we made the decision to give up our apartment because it didn't feel And actually Kelly from City Ballet took it over. So that's
Oh,
nice to,
really? Oh, that's nice.
yeah, in the
Yeah.
same family. Because we had a great landlord and great neighbors, and we really, that was our first like apartment we picked out together. So it was a really special little place in Ridgewood, Queens. And we went to Louisiana. But because I couldn't come to France yet because of visa stuff. But the goal being like, let's get to France because we're kind of twiddling our thumbs doing nothing when we could be like really doing something.
Yeah.
And we decided to move here full time. So, you know, we definitely didn't create the residency because of all these things, but I definitely think that the unrest of America and the pandemic and this combination of factors was like, do this now.
Yeah.
And
That's what I was just going to ask about, like having that sense of timing for something that seems so big, like an international move and buying property and all that kind of thing. To me seems just like so gargantuanly enormous that like I feel like I would need such an absolute like kick in the butt to make something like that happen. So just like how you knew that was the right timing, and did you have sort of like a plan when you had started thinking about the idea of like we're going to do this when we're 50 or like that kind of thing? Was there sort of a timeline in place before you kind of were pushed into it?
I mean, we bought it with the intention to like within the next few years be here full
Mm,
time.
mm,
Um, so it definitely was like we want it to happen now.
yeah.
We're even like, I think we would have come in the summer of 2020 anyways.
Mm,
But I probably would have gone back for Nutcracker or for like the fall season
yeah.
and then maybe come back a little bit, or but there would have been more back and forth. But we were originally planning to come in the summer of 2020,
Okay.
just not to just to kind of keep a a more strongly rooted foot in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that that foot has not gone away. I mean, I'm still working in 4 or 5 places in New York
Yeah.
virtually, and hope that once stuff starts to open, like my company can still have shows, and we have some things tentatively lined up. But I do really love that community and want to like still be a part of it. And I'm really interested in that exchange of like bringing artists from New York, or even sponsoring artists to go there. Like, what can that look like?
Yeah.
But it's definitely going to be like time wise less a lot less time in New York
Mm-hmm.
than we had like
Can I
originally.
ask, like, completely aside from like external factors, like internally, how do you know when you're ready to do something like that?
Mm. I mean, I guess you never really know, right? It's
That's
kind of
true.
like starting a company or getting married, or I imagine maybe like having a kid or something too.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, like when you started your company, how did you know it was time to do that you were ready to like be a director and all those
I
things?
wasn't really at all. I made a piece of dance. I made a piece. I had an opportunity. I had a fellowship at Lincoln Center Education, and I made a piece. And then the dancers were like, "I want to keep dancing," and I was like, "I want to keep making work." And then we were like, "Okay, well, let's do a second piece." And then like 11 years later, we're still like, "Let's do a 76 piece," or
Yeah. Is
whatever.
it some of the same dancers that you started with like 11 years
Yeah,
ago?
yeah. So like my associate director, Brianna Gribble, has been with me 11 years. My
Mhm.
rehearsal director and dancer, Allison Beeler, 11 years. Oh, you know Allie, right?
Oh, yeah, of course. The
Like
best.
from the very beginning. Um, and yeah, and most of the dancers have been with me like 6+ years. So we have
Wow.
a definite like community that we've made there.
Yeah.
Um, and here, I mean, there's also some like thing of autonomy, I think, where I was like starting to be like, I want to be in charge of my own space. Or
Mm,
when I make changes to the space, I want them to be more permanent. Like I was like, I kept being like, I don't want to buy that shelf because like, I don't know, I might move, or we might go to France, or we
yeah.
might like, why do I want to invest in a nice shelf? And then being like, oh, it's really annoying to like not have a shelf. I mean, that's like a very
That's like where I feel, I mean, before COVID, that's kind of where I was, where it was like jumping from like one grant to the next and like reassembling a cast every time. And yeah, like,
right. Yeah. And it's hard to maintain that. And I think it takes like so much energy, like not just the thing, like all the work behind the thing is way, it's like the, tip of the volcano in the ocean where it's like underneath there's so much work and time and energy just to have this little thing that's very rewarding. But I just started thinking like, how can I, and then the other, I guess, thing that I've been thinking about for the past few years is like brave spaces. And I started to give brave space master classes when I was on tour with the company, mostly like targeting younger women, teenage girls kind of in smaller towns.
yeah.
And so then starting to think like, oh, this is another way that I could be making a space like that. And I potentially be teaching and or facilitating and or bringing artists here that I admire and supporting their work. So kind of like, how can I be in the middle of that, like giving more opportunity and getting opportunity instead of like always feel like I'm trying to apply for a million things or trying to get it. And I think, I mean, COVID kind of reinforced family. Like I'm just like, wow, it is like the people are so important. Like even with MMDC, I thought I was gonna miss the choreography and the performance, and I do, but like I miss the people. I miss my friends. I miss that community. I miss, and same with like with my family now. I think more than ever, like I'm so grateful to be in a loving relationship and to have like supportive in-laws nearby and to have like cousins that we're exchanging permaculture tips with, or like just
awesome.
yeah, all the things. There's like so many. I mean, we get like free hay from one cousin, and then another cousin, like a tree fell in the river, and we paid a second cousin $50 to like bring his tractor over and pull it out, which like we would have never even known how to do. I mean, there's like so many homeowners that I'm like, what?
I was just gonna say, just hearing the words like free hay and a tractor in a sentence, like in the New York environment, is like, wow, that sounds like just so different than what it would be here.
Yeah, I mean, well, my mom like constantly, and I mean, Jeremy and I talk about it too. Like, I grew up like wanting to be inside most of the time. I mean, maybe when I was little, but like I like to play outside. But like as soon as I discovered dance, I was like, I'm in a studio and I love school. So I was like, school studio. So for me to like this morning, I like got the potatoes ready to germinate for like, and then like then we went to the market. That's just like an outdoor market every Tuesday. And then we like collected a bunch of wood and did wood chips for the pathways in the garden all afternoon. And then I like got on Zoom at 3 and did my meetings and classes and everything. And that's like a pretty normal day, but not, I mean, I would have never imagined that I would be like, I don't know, doing any of that stuff.
Yeah. Do you think you'll sort of like transition out of that as maybe if you get like more faculty and staff to help run the facility? Do you think you'll go back to your indoor notions?
No, I don't think so. I think that like one of the biggest discoveries has been like the outdoors, nature. I mean, like some super obvious things, but like, and how like fulfilling it is and how artistic it is. Like we're making like a terraced garden. So we have like a hill that we're turning into a terrace essentially. And there's like, the little barrier, and we're making it out of wood that we cut down. And I have to like think about how long the wood is going to be, and then how does it overlap, and what is the patterning, and I'm like, I'm making a visual art piece, and and it's physical, which I also like as a dancer love, and it's artistic. And so I'm like, oh, I'm creating, or like we built a dam, and I was like, okay, which piece goes first and where do I put it? And then, okay, and let's figure it out. And it's like teamwork too, because you're doing it together. And then you have a product, which is really nice too. At the end, you can be like, hey, I did a thing, But I think
is that fulfilling in a way that's different than like making dances or like leading a residency with students, that kind of thing? Something that feels a little bit more like permanent, or like working with your hands in a more tactile way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is very like there's something visceral about working with your hands, or something like that goes back, I don't know. Yeah, something very naturally fulfilling. But I don't know. I feel like we're lucky with dance that like we haven't lost that kind of embodiment of work in the same way that maybe someone at a desk or writing or
Yeah.
computer all day has kind of drifted away from that like physicality. So
Yeah.
it was really easy for me to be like, oh, I can see where these things overlap, and like, oh, okay, we have 70 kilos of soil. Let's go. Like, yeah,
Get the tractor.
yeah.
You feel
It's a,
like that's still true? I feel like for me, it's been like such a huge shift with teaching through, like digital teaching, which
mm,
I really don't like that much. I really miss like being in the room with bodies and stuff like that.
mhm,
Like not just because of like I think it's easier to demonstrate and it's easier to like touch people and things like that, but like just the whole experience of it for me just feels like not really what I love about like teaching and dancing with people.
mhm.
And I feel like now we're in this strange time with the dance that I'm seeing. I mean, obviously with things being shut down, like hopefully that will come back more. But I feel like it's so funny to me that like New York City ballet dancers, like these gorgeous, amazing, talented people have been out of work for a year, not allowed to perform. And TikTok is like storming the media with what people think of as dance now, which is great. I think it's made things accessible. I love seeing like the way that I think more people are trying out dance and being creative with choreography. Um, but I feel like it's really changing the way that we experience dance in like these little short, like 1 minute bursts that I feel like are usually like really highly filtered and have all the edits and things like that. Like, what do you think? Is that something that you've thought about at all in like creating this residency, or in like how you see your work going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think it's very difficult to, I think that like film is a different medium. So when we think about dance on film, and as a choreographer, I'm like, oh, I have to learn a new medium. I'm not like, oh, I'm a choreographer now, I can make a dance film.
Yeah.
Um, but I think some people are more naturally inclined to do that. For me, that's been super hard to do, and something I'm not really that interested in doing. Um, we've made one so far, and really it was like more about the community practice than about the product. But and then like as we move forward with TikTok and everything,
Are you
I don't
on
know.
TikTok?
I'm not, no.
Okay.
But I mean, my kids have like Flipgrid, which I feel like is like basically the same thing, that they're
Hmm.
in these little short clips. And I do think that like the residency is aimed at disconnecting and reconnecting. So disconnecting from this kind of,
Yeah. Yeah.
and reconnecting to yourself, to the earth, to the community, and to your practice.
Hmm.
So I'm hoping that maybe even, I mean, because there has been so much digital connection, people will be longing and wanting even more a place to disconnect and reconnect, to share a meal together, or
Hmm.
to go walk together, or to dig in the earth together, and to garden together, or to watch each other's work in person. So I mean, I guess I'm hoping that there's that kind of niche kind of and I mean, and with all of this too, we're kind of thinking about like creativity, sustainability, accessibility, and simplicity. Those have been like our things we've been thinking about a lot. And I think a lot of them are coming up more and more. Like all of a sudden, sustainability, which maybe as many people didn't know about, like everyone's made bread this year. Like who has not made bread this year? I mean, I haven't, because Jeremy's too good at making bread, so I don't. But but you know, a lot, and people started gardening, or maybe they had their little like basil plant in their New York window, or like
Yeah.
it became more something that people are more aware of. And I think with climate change, it's going to be like something we need to be even more aware of, like what could we do if you can't go to the store, or what could
Right.
we do if it was extreme temperatures or extreme storms, or like all these kinds of different things. So I do think like in one way I'm super thankful for the virtual world because I'm able to connect with so many people. I have like so many Zoom meetings with people that I don't think I would have otherwise like went out for it takes more time to like commute, see
Yeah.
somebody, go back. And even like we have the Watermill Council, we're calling it, with like 8 different committees to support Moulin Belle right now. And we have like 42 volunteers, international volunteers on that. And I do not think that would have happened if people weren't used to Zoom. Because now we're like,
Yeah.
hey, we're having a Zoom meeting, and people in Portugal and people in New York and people in California and people in Croatia are all like, cool, see you there. And like a year
These
ago,
are the volunteers.
yeah. So we have like a equity, diversity, and inclusion committee, sustainability, marketing, launch, leadership, community engagement, and business development. Um, so we can kind of just be getting advice and some help on some things, because I'm not an expert in all those things by any means.
I was gonna say, can I please sign up for this? Like, especially the business advice part that you just mentioned, because
Yeah.
as an artist, I'm like clueless about all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think like that was my other kind of thought, was like, you know, in the business development committee, for example, it's led by this like amazing businesswoman who has that expertise. But then some people on the committee, like one person is a fashion designer in Paris who knows how to start a company in France. So that's like really valuable.
Very useful. Yeah.
But doesn't have like a business mindset at all.
Mm-hmm.
And another person is like, oh, well, I mean, there's just like all these little kind of niches
Yeah.
of whereas like if we all pull together, hopefully we can kind of make something successful. But especially as artists, like without a lot of that training, or you know, a lot of that schooling or education, that we all have like we all have figured out something that we're good at. So how can I kind of like pull those resources and like and also create like a community where people can be learning from each other. So hopefully that happens.
Well, the reason it's so funny that you say that, because like the reason why I really wanted to pick your brain on this, not just because like I think it sounds amazing and like, you know, we want to get the word out, and I'm probably going to apply at some point to come and bother you. But I've always wanted to have a residency that's kind of like for teachers, like to come and sort of like experiment on your teaching style, and like also kind of have sort of like a community that lives together. I think for me, like I really realized that I like that kind of thing when I went away to boarding school, and it was like having meals with the people that you dance with and you take class with every day, and like you live together. And it was also the same time that I started reading like Harry Potter, so I think it was kind of like this feeling of like, oh, I live in this magical community kind of thing. But how to make all that kind of thing happen, when to make it happen. And I think something that you just touched on that I think I'm struggling with, that I think is such a good point, is you said in the very beginning of our little Zoom thing here, you said that you knew that you were really good at making a community. And like, how do you realize these the things that you're actually good at? Because sometimes I think like, oh, I'm really good at this thing, but then it's like, turns out maybe not. Like, do you get that from like feedback from other people? Like you mentioned the dancers just kind of wanted to keep dancing from you. Like, do you get knowledge about yourself more from like the community around you and how you're sort of structured and of use within the community, or like where you feel fulfillment? Sorry, I just rambled for like 10 minutes.
No. I just was looking something up because I wanted to share it with you. So I think, I mean, there's a lot to say about that. So first,
I just asked like 10 questions. Like,
no, and we can circle back to any that I missed. But so I do a lot of work on myself, I think. So it doesn't like I'm not like, and I'm good at this, like randomly. I think it's like, okay, let's figure this out. And so one of the things that I did was last year, I took a course called Creative Catalyst, Artist as Leader, Innovator, and Entrepreneur. And this year I'm a teaching assistant in that same course. And
wow.
it's an online course, and that was part of my like goal, was to try to be involved even before the pandemic, ironically, to be involved in more online sources of income, because I knew I was not going to be in one place all year anymore. So I had tried to do that, and luckily that worked out. But so some of the things are like creating your hedgehog, it's called. So that would be like, you take one circle, Venn diagram style of what you're passionate about, one circle of like what sustains you. So that can be financial, but it can also be health wise or things that you might know that you need for your life. And then like what you're a rock star at, or what you think you're good at. And sometimes you can break those things down. Like you might say choreography, and then you can be like, okay, well, what goes into, like, okay, that's pattern making, and that might be leading a room, and that might be, and so so that's one thing. And then also in that course, and actually I did it before with I did it with the Keenan Institute. I've done it a couple different times now, where you kind of talk about your different circles, your worlds of communities, and like what's overlapping and where you are of value in each one. And then also, what are the like translatable skills? So I think sometimes as artists, like we don't realize our own translatable skills. So like creating something from nothing or blank page is a skill that a lot of artists like have, because they go into a room, they don't know anything, and they have to make a choreography, like a piece of choreography, or they have to use a canvas and they paint it, right? But like as an event manager, that's a skill set that directly translates to a different type of job, like event managing, right? But we don't really think like, oh, that's a skill. We think like, that's part of doing that's part of, I don't know, what I do. I'm creative,
the routine of like being a choreographer, but
yeah. And there's so many different things like that like that I didn't realize I had skills in, that when I started to like reevaluate like failure and resilience, or rhythms, or reading a room, or creating loyalty, or like sustainable groups, even like that, how people are communicating with me, and or editing and valuing, or like, so there's all these kinds of different little things. And I started thinking like, what am I interested in? What am I good at? And what is sustainable? And then also the places where I was getting hired. So I noticed like, okay, I had a fellowship at, I was like a choreographer for the Choreographic Institute at UNCSA. And then the next year they asked me to come back just for the first week for the new choreographers, to help create community for them, to bring them to even like be a tour guide of the space, to introduce them to the existing staff, because I had some knowledge there. And so I'm like, oh, this is a job that I was hired for without like thinking about where my next job is, kind of. And then I became the associate director of that initiative. But really it's because the thing I was good at, the thing I was hired for, was creating community quickly. It wasn't like my extensive knowledge of business plans, or social media, and how to get 10,000 followers on Instagram. Like, and I was able to kind of bring people in with those expertise. And that's kind of the thing that I am best at, kind of. So that, and so I think like kind of it's figuring out, okay, like, where have I been hired? What does this have in common? What do people tell me I'm good at? What does this have in common? Where do I feel the best? Like, is there a moment that I'm like, oh yeah, even my mom was giving me an art class last week while I was in Louisiana. And the first class I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And the second one I was like, oh, I like my painting. And then I was like, oh, it's really rhythmic and like pattern oriented. And then like, that's how so much my choreography is. It's like very rhythmic and pattern oriented. It's almost like mathematical with like a quirky storytelling edge in these very specific worlds. And turns out like, as a painter, I do the same thing, like not as well, because don't know what I'm doing at all. I'm no practice
like
in it.
Falling back on your old patterns kind of thing.
But yeah, and so like those are also your strengths. And I think like sometimes we're taught to figure out our weaknesses and then like make those better. But really, and it's the same thing when you're engaging in communities or leading classrooms. Really, it's about like, what are your strengths? And then like, that's what to build upon. And then also like acknowledge your weaknesses and where can you learn from experts, or where can you try to, but you don't have to be an expert at the things you're bad at. Right. And I think that's something I've learned over the years in New York, is that like you have to ask for help. and people want to help if you're willing to like to show them something that you're an expert at, or there's something you can exchange, then there is like a symbiotic relationship. But if you're like, oh, I'm expert at making a website, like I'm not, and I really hate to do it. It's like not fun for me at all. And there are people that have like have a good eye. Like I do not have a good eye for like taking photos for social media. And I'm
like
trying.
logo design and that kind of stuff.
No, and I did it in the beginning, because I was like, but actually like there's a way to kind of exchange that and ask people to like be on your team, and then also contribute to them in the way that whatever your strength is too.
Yeah.
But it does take some work, because you kind of have to be like, so why am I good at this, or like, am I good at this?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've been hired here before, or like I had this job for 7 years, so I must be doing something right. So what am I doing right there? And then kind of seeing where those things overlap. But I can send you the 24 translatable skills if you want. That's a fun thing.
Yeah, I would love to do it. That sounds great. I feel like recently I was thinking about that advice that you hear, that's like, figure out what pain you can handle. You know what I'm saying? Like, instead of figuring out like what you were saying, like what you're good at and that kind of thing, it's more like figure out what you can handle that will be a problem with any job, because every job or every role that you take is going to have some kind of a trade-off in your life. And like, what doesn't seem like that big of a deal. And I was kind of thinking about that, and it's kind of it's just a very strange way to approach, I don't know, to approach like moving forward in your life and like taking on challenges and things like that. Cause I feel like some of those things are so hard to predict until you're like there. You know what I'm saying? I feel like I'm one of those people too, where like, if work or life or whatever like throws a challenge at me, I feel like I can handle anything for like a short duration of time. And then the minute it's over, it's like, I never want to go through that again. Like avoidance kind of thing.
But that's super valuable information too, because I think there are people that like, if they can get short breaks or something, that they're okay, but they can handle something for a really long time.
Yeah.
So like, even if it's like, and even with you, sounds like your life has already been more project structured. So maybe it's a thing where you're like, oh, how can I, like, I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna do this, and like as a consultant or something, where you're bringing people in, and then you get to finish and move on to the next pain or the next.
I think I'm like a really good starter, and then I get tired of things kind of easily. You know what I'm saying? And I've had like a funny transition with that recently, because about 2 years ago I did like a maternity leave residency at a school here in New York, where I was teaching at that school like 4 days a week, and there for full days and things like that. And since I moved here, I have done like, you teach at like 5 different schools a day, like 2 classes or something like that. And it was the first time that I'd really been like really connected with these kids for like a couple of months, multiple days a week. And it was one of those things where like, I think at that point in my life, I loved the kids, I loved the school, but I was so happy when it ended, because I think I liked doing things in those short bursts. And that was just like 2 years ago. But even now, I don't know if it's because of the pandemic, but I feel like I'm like craving that sort of like longer duration of a connection with people, and like seeing growth. And like, I think it's harder for me also, even like as a teacher, because that's the one thing that like I don't get bored of, like, because I feel like I'm constantly like failing at it, and it's like interesting to me, where I'm like, oh, I want to like get better at it. But yeah, like I feel like it's harder to judge, your own progress in something when you're constantly like moving around and like the parameters of things become different all the time, you know? So I don't know if it's the quarantine, but I feel like I'm like looking for more of that sort of like
Yeah.
long-term connection, community.
Yeah. Um, what about the pain? It makes me just think about like priorities. Like, so maybe if you, it's hard to like think about what you're good at even, but if you're thinking about like my priorities are time and movement, like one of my priorities is like movement forward. And like, I'm also like a starter.
Okay.
I love starting things, and finishing is really difficult. And that's just like something I know and can either like embrace, and sometimes can, and then sometimes just have to like buckle down and be like, okay, I have to finish this thing for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But then like for me, I guess thinking about like longer term relationships, like with this space now is going to be like a long-term relationship, but within it I can have like artists that are here for shorter periods of time. So I'm kind of like tricking myself to be like, look, it's new every week, or it's new every month, or
Yeah.
whatever, and new every season.
Like fresh blood kind of thing.
Yeah, because I also like, I mean, I never wanted to be, I mean, yeah, multiple people have been like, okay, like get your master's and go teach somewhere, at a school. And I just like, it's not, I'm really not, that's such hard work. And I feel like it's really not me.
Yeah.
But I would love to like be a guest artist at a university,
Mhm.
and I would love to be a returning guest artist. And that's something here too. I want people to come back, because I think a lot of residencies and spaces are like one and done, and then
Yeah.
they're kind of fleeting and flitting and going away. So like, how can you see some growth and see some change and build relationships? I
Mhm.
think I really hope that we can do some of that. Um, I'm almost at my time, but was that signal? But yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't want to like take up too much of your time, but is there anything else that like I didn't touch on, or that the other interviews and things that you've done about the space that haven't touched on, about like what you really want to see and do with this? Like what kind of impact you want it to have, either on yourself or like the wider community or dance community?
Yeah. I mean, I think like the coming into the space, thinking of it with those creative, resilient, sustainable, resilient, accessible, and simple, even if you aren't those things. So like, even if you aren't an artist, maybe you're like you're in a small business and you want to do a creative retreat to
Mm-hmm.
get thinking creatively, or maybe you're like a New Yorker that's never had a farm, but you're interested in sustainability. Like, I think like those spaces where there's like more ambiguity and a welcome and openness, um, is kind of like what we're hoping to make. And how can the exchange with the community, like how can we benefit from being here, and how can the community benefit from us being here? So hoping to kind of like reinvest into the community in our work, and like what we're producing in theory, but also like just it like economically, that we can like go on a wine tour at the local cave, so that we're kind of like helping to fund it that way. And rethinking about accessibility, because I mean, I've been fortunate to be able to go to a couple of different residencies, and even like even the ones that are cheap or free, um, you have to take off work,
Yeah.
you have to have stable housing, you have to most of the time pay for travel, you
Right.
have to pay for a pet sitter, or
I
pay
was
for
just gonna say pet sitter.
like, there's kind of like all these and you have to have a stable income, so that when you come back, you have a job too.
Yeah.
So there's like kind of all these hidden factors that I feel like we don't think about, if you are that I didn't think about before because I had enough money to think that $18 a night was really cheap, because I was like, well, I can afford the travel. But like now, I mean, some of the work that I've been doing this year too is like thinking about how to make it more accessible and what that means. And that means even in like our intake forms or applications, including a different type of demographic information, or like how are we really collecting that? And and I think it's going to just be a continual work in progress to figure that out for sure. But definitely something that, and it doesn't mean that we're going to be able to provide that to everyone, but that we're thinking we'll have like guests and rentals, and then we'll have subsidized, and then we'll have artists in residence, so that, and work exchange too, where work exchange is free for the people that come to do that work. So hopefully there's enough different avenues for people to engage that we're hitting a broader audience of people that are interested in a space like that. So it's definitely not like a luxury retreat, you know, it's a working space.
Like those have you ever seen the ones that are like the yoga retreats where it's like people go to like a Caribbean island and they just like it would be fun to be a teacher in one of those. Like,
yes, I know a couple of people that are actually.
Yeah.
I think that those experiences are really valid too. I think like the most important thing is like transparency up front, so that like when you're here, it's communal living, you're gonna get your hands dirty, and hopefully you're gonna disconnect and reconnect to something. And in that there's like some discovery and some willingness and bravery and authenticity. But just like being really transparent about like what kind of residency retreat kind of we are, and that you don't have to be a working artist to come, or that, you know, we want families to be able to come, or we want people with limited financial means to be able to come, or, you know, how can we kind of figure that out. And I think we're just going to be doing a lot of figuring as we go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's one of those things where like you don't know the challenges until it's like it's there, and then you will find a solution.
Yeah. I love your like the targeting of teachers. I think that's a really great thought, you know, like how I thought about caregivers actually, because
ooh, yeah, that would be so useful, I'm sure. But
but I bet and that's the other thing actually I'll say, is that like before we came here, when I talked to people about it, I'd be like, so I think like maybe we want to have like a dance residency upstate. And people would be like, cool. And then I'd be like, okay, maybe we want to have like a little farm in France. And people are like, wow. So just like gauging that reaction.
Yeah.
I think
feel like I always say when I talk about my like teacher retreat kind of idea, I always say like Hogwarts for the arts, but not specific, but like for the art of teaching. It could be anything. It could be web design, it could be pottery, it could be dance, any of those kinds of things. And I feel like I'm in that stage where like I'm getting really good responses, but it's like I don't know how to like choose a partner and buy property. So I'm dealing with all the like logistical things. The creative idea. It's like what you said about like creating things out of a blank page. Like I'm good at that part. Yeah.
Well, I mean, even like asking people when you have those kind of meetings or something, like just asking people like, oh, you know, how do you think you could help? And then just like making a little list of like name, email, and like interested in sustainability, or has
that's a good idea.
Money before or whatever, so that when you are like, oh, I need help picking a property, maybe you're like, oh, this person I didn't know was a real estate agent is actually you know, has this history that I didn't know about, and I kind of like capitalize on that. I think like, because we see people just as like we interact with them, right? So we don't really know
That's so true.
All those hidden talents that people have. It happened to me today. I was like, we discovered a well in the front yard, and I was like, I don't know how we're gonna, like, we would like to use this, but I don't know how, or like, is there a pump? It's by the garden, so in theory it could be great, but there's a big wall. And the person I was on the Zoom with was like, I've worked with wells before, like take some pictures and get
so random.
you know. So it just kind of like communicating more. I
Yeah.
mean, I think pandemic wise, I have had like more Zoom calls than ever in my life, because probably
I've
everyone.
never had a Zoom call before the pandemic.
Yeah, no, me either. Have I? I mean, I feel like, of course I have, but I don't think so. Yeah, it didn't exist. Jeremy said it didn't exist. I'm sure the stocks barely existed compared to, but yeah, I mean, I think I used to go into meetings with like, oh, what do I want to get out of it, kind of, or like, what is this meeting about? Like, I should prep for it. And now I feel like, especially with people you kind of know, like, let's just talk about ideas, and then normally something comes out of it, even if it's like a connection to somebody else, or if it's a little piece of advice. I talked to Deb Losey today, actually.
Oh my gosh, I love Deb.
Yeah, it was so, and like we ended up talking about, like, she's been to so many different residencies. So we didn't have a plan, but we ended up talking about some of her experiences and like the importance of snacks in the kitchen, because
yes,
you're providing for the artist, and it's also a place where people can like meet and talk and community, and like then I started thinking about like the importance of the kitchen, and like in our, what we're renovating when, and like should we bump that up to do it sooner, so that's like the heart of the place. And but that wasn't like me thinking about like, I don't know, like, what am I going to
I'm going
get
to
out?
ask her about the importance of the kitchen. Like, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know, I think you have to make time for it. It takes time, for sure.
Yeah,
but it's valuable if you have the time.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice? That's one thing
Yeah.
we all could use more of, for sure. Well, on that note, because I know I've taken up a lot of your time here just picking your brain, but thank you. This was so helpful for me, like personally, and I'm just so excited to see like what you're creating. I know it's going to be amazing, like everything that you touch. I really miss this year, like our little Nutcracker PD development days, because I always stole so many ideas from you. I'll fully admit it. Like,
that's the thing. That's what I'm talking with the company. It's like, I miss teaching the kids a lot, and I miss being in the room and all that. But I also miss like the PDs, and like the meeting the team and the lunch. Like, I
was just gonna say, our lunches were always so fun. Yeah. It's so good. Colleen knows how to order a spread, does she not?
Yes. Yeah. If you have other thoughts that come up, or questions now or in the coming months, or you do start looking at I mean, I do, like, even when I was saying that, like, one of my dancers that's helping me actually with like marketing is does have a real estate license. And so like, if you were looking at property, it might be a good person to like run it by, to be like, oh, did you check out these certain things? Or
yeah, that would be amazing.
Use me as a resource for whatever things you need. Or if you're like, I don't know, like I just wrote my first business plan. And so,
oh wow, okay, yeah.
like, oh, I need a business plan. You can like look at mine and be like, copy paste and just change the name or something.
Really?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
like,
gonna hold you to that.
the more resources that we can share, like, you're not a competitor. I mean, like, you're only building up on the arts world and residencies and creating artists and a better world. And unless you come to Dordogne, then maybe I have to be like, okay,
yeah, don't worry. You're definitely the authority in that one. We'll leave that to your domain.
I think like the more we can do that, I still think someone sharing their resume with me like 4 years ago helped me get better jobs, because I like didn't format it to highlight my current events, and then I changed it and was like, oh, I look better, actually.
Yeah.
Like,
I do feel like that's a funny thing in the arts world, where it's like there's probably enough opportunity to go around for everybody, and especially if we're all creative types, for us to create our own things. But I think sometimes with the arts, especially with dance, we have this like scarcity mindset where it's like there's only so many jobs in a company, or there's only so many dollars in the world. And a lot of dollars in the world. We should just
it's like, how do we find donor? Like, if I share how to find donors, like, doesn't mean my donors are gonna like go over to you.
Exactly. Oh my gosh,
we're like, wait, you might. I mean, I guess
I need those $10.
Yeah. I think $10 too. But yeah, feel free to email me or we can Zoom again whenever you are on your next steps or
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much, Mari. It was so good to see you too.
Yeah, nice to catch up.
I know. All right, take care. Have a great what day is it? It's Tuesday, Wednesday. I don't even know what day it is. I was about to say great weekend. I have no sense of time. This is why I need like people around me.
It's a holiday, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. President's Day. Happy President's Day. I don't know.
I was just thinking like New York City schools are off this week, so I'm like on vacation.
Oh, right. I know. Yeah, exactly.
Not really. I mean, I'm not on vacation.
I was gonna say you were just like barreling hay and making a well. I'm really on vacation. I'm gonna try and like make myself go to the gym. That's like what I'm gonna try and do.
I'm jealous. I like wish there was a gym I could go to. Gyms are not open, and also there's none like anywhere close to us. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's one like 20 minutes away. So if you were in dire need, you could. The town is less than 1,000 people, so not a lot of anything here.
Oh wow, yeah, okay. So there's probably like one gym for the whole town.
In our town, there's no gym. In our town, there's like a butcher, 2 bakeries, a grocery store, a wine cave, a hair cutters, and like one little boutique. That's like pretty much it.
Oh my gosh. So the essentials.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of towns like close by, and each town is kind of like known for something. So there's like a town that has like a really good restaurant. There's like a town that has a really good butcher, a town that has like, you know, the duck for the duck season.
Like, it's like known for a dish or something like that. Yeah. I love places like that. That's the best.
Yeah, there's a farm, like a duck farm. It's like where you go in the winter to get like your pate and stuff. And it's like, yeah.
That's so French.
We're very French here in France.
Oh but I'm supposed to go to Philly tonight for like a comedy show. That's like my big adventurous thing.
Whoa.
Yeah.
You're traveling. That's so cool.
Yeah, I'm getting on a train.
Well, good luck.
Thank you.
That'll be fun. Everybody needs a good laugh, right?
I know. Yeah. That's like what's keeping me
live.
Moment. Huh?
Is it live?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, we still have like a 6 o'clock curfew here.
So. Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and everything is closed. I mean, like not everything, but restaurants. There's no restaurants open.
Yeah. I mean, same with New York. It's so funny. I was just thinking about it. Like, why am I living in New York City and paying New York rent, and I'm going away to Philly where it's significantly cheaper for like a comedy show? Like, yeah. I'm starting to get to that, like, because I love New York so much, but it's like, maybe it's time.
Yeah. Well, New York will always be there.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Just will we?
Yeah, we might not be. I'm going to be in this duck pate town.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
All right. Sounds good. Bye.